Hello, friends. This is Cold Run. Welcome back to a blind playthrough of Tunic, which is not just me anytime. This time we actually have a new person joining us on the mic, which is at Hatstand and four numbers, which I don't remember.
Perfect.
And you want to this is the person who both encouraged me to pick up Tunic. Um, I think if I remember, I visited her and her family recently. Her room is just covered in fox art and like stuffed with foxes. So this is really a thing for her, but that's okay. We don't judge on this channel. And the it looks and she also has been helping me very much to decode the language. And you want to say anything else that might be a lie or truthful about yourself?
So I go by Hatstand 4510 on the internets. And yeah, I like puzzles. So this is very much kind of a puzzle sort of thing. And I knew when I recommended the game to you that figuring out the language is an optional but really interesting and fun aspect to the game. So I was very excited when you said that I could help you figure it out.
Is it even possible to like not necessarily 100% it, but to get like whatever counts as the good ending without decoding the language, like just through context clues and trial and error, or is it really just it's you really have to know the language to do all that, any of that?
I think that you can get the 100% sort of good ending without the knowing the language, but it certainly makes some of the kind of mini puzzles in the game. It gives you some hints and clues to it that you wouldn't otherwise have. So it can give you some more hints that help you. Like it doesn't necessarily tell you the answer, but it can, just give you some more context. And it does give more context on the background of the story.
Hmm.
Which again, most of it you can figure out kind of from the environment. Like this is one of the things I personally am impressed with the design of the game is that they do such a great job with the environmental storytelling that when you get the backstory, a lot of it is just filling in details and kind of confirming the broad swaths that you already have figured out just from observing the world of the game. I think that's pretty neat.
So like even the table of contents I'm looking at, like there's stuff here about Holy Cross. I'm looking at page like 3, 4, and 5. Like a
Mhm.
lot of it is, hero, cathedral, a terrible power rises, the world's thrown into ruins, and then there's pictures of of the foxes all have the three keys, and there's like the statue of Fox Mom, but then Fox Mom turns into like starts crucifying other foxes. And then there's that wild picture at the bottom of page 4, um, which is like the great hyperspace time war all of a sudden, which is like lasers, monsters blasting into evil shadow demons things. And so I get some of the gist of this, but there's so much background that I'm looking forward to like actually understanding beyond this.
Mhm.
Oh
Yeah.
shit! I just noticed. Even do you see the top of page 4?
Yes.
How I just noticed that the fox tyrant goddess mom has the same thing that we have, because we know at the end of the end of what I'm going to assume is the bad ending, we get that thing that lets us dash, and that's like her crown.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that's like us from the future. That's like one of those apps that ages you up. Uh,
Yeah.
that's super cool. I didn't notice that detail.
Yep. And
Um,
she could dash during the fight with you, right?
could she? I get she could, right?
I think so. She had that swift, like,
Yeah, she
pointy
had the.
sword move,
That's right.
lunge,
Hmm.
perhaps.
And yeah, and so a lot of this I'm seeing like probably does tell the tale, and I don't think they're gonna straight up troll us. Like I don't think the language is gonna say like the picture to your right is total fiction. The truth is really something else. But like
Right.
it's yeah. So here's my thought is that I'll probably go through the slow part of translating this, and like as I see stuff I'll cut back in. But at least while Hatstand is here, I want to give her a chance to kind of to show off, to brag about like how awesome she is and how awesome she did at like uncovering this. So like I have pulled up the uh, this is probably the first time in OBS history that Microsoft Paint has been put in the foreground, but I have Microsoft Paint here of what she came up with, which is the language translation. So yeah, how did you start on this?
So the place where, when I was just kind of looking through the manual that seemed obvious to me to start was with the compass rose on page 34, because we know that the compass is showing us north, east, west, and south. And then you could see on the map itself, you have like northeast and northwest and southeast and southwest. And so that I thought was a good starting point to start to identify these different the different letters. And I should say that I didn't come into this language decoding project completely ignorant. The one thing that I knew coming in ahead of time was that the characters that were grouped together were for syllables, not for individual letters. So I knew it wasn't just N, it was like a like NO is what our first assumption was for north, and like SO for south, and EA for east, like there'd be at least a couple letters or maybe a syllable. And so um our first pass of trying to figure out what was going on, it's like, well, they're separated by this horizontal bar, so maybe the top half is the consonant and the bottom half is the vowel. So that was our initial hypothesis. And so we figured out what we thought in looked like. And on a different page, we figured out the word and from context clues, and it seemed to have the same thing in it. So we're like, okay, great, we figured out in. But then we we had figured out a few other individual letters, like on page 13 we figured out the words like press and hold. And so we knew P from the press, and we kind of figured out the L and the D. So we're getting a few individual letters from that, but it was still mostly opaque. Oh, the other letters we knew early on were the S from press, and then the Z, which is my favorite because you found that from interacting with the sleeping little ghosty fox who is asleep, and so Z Z Z Z Z, right?
Yes. Oh, the yes.
Um,
Yeah, that fox saved us some time.
yeah, that was delightful. And we also then got the additional delight of realizing that S and Z were just mirrors of each other. So it was like, oh, like they are in English. But like one of the stumpers we had is like, we're like, okay, we know what P looks like from the word press, but then if we go to the page where it teaches you to pray, it would mean the rest of the word is pray. And it was like, wow, that's really complicated to just mean Ray. And like, why didn't the R's seem to match? Like, it was like we were just kind of running into walls, and it was like we're not really getting any further. So we had made some initial progress, but then it kind of ground to a halt.
There were too many inconsistencies, like because yeah, we just
Yeah.
there were like common pieces to them, but it was either way more complicated than we were expecting, or we weren't looking at it in quite the right way.
Right, exactly. But one thing that we realized were that the characters were written on this kind of elongated hexagon form, which you noted was similar to the shape of some of those enemies. I don't remember what those enemies are called, if they have names, but like the pillars with the little wheels and the little three eyes.
Yeah, the where was there was a picture of one in this manual. I'm just going to take a look to see if I can find it here.
Yeah, let me
Uh
look.
it was like
To
drawn in, it was like a hand sketched one. It was like a
Mhm.
hand sketched version I saw someone drew. Um or regardless of the, not even the monsters. I'm looking at page 33. Like that pillar that you pray to and it energizes. the pillars
Right.
containing the crucified ghost foxes. Um,
Yeah, it's a very consistent shape in the game. And so that was a really neat moment to realize that not only is it a consistent shape in the game, but it's also like the shape of the language. And so
so
I was
friggin' cool.
so we kind of ended a session there. And then before the next one, I thought, we have kind of my scribblings from what we were figuring out, but it was hard to be consistent with my angles and my lines and my size and all that. And since we had determined that they were on this elongated hex like form, why don't I make a template that we can then start to write on? And that decision was made just to make it easier to write more consistently, and it ended up being the thing that, like, blew the whole, like, puzzle wide open, um, because you had gotten the table of contents, which confirmed that, page 12, the header for it was controls, and so when I was writing things out on this hex form and I had rewritten kind of all the words we knew and all the pieces we had already understood, I wrote them on the hex and then I wrote out the word controls. And I realized there was no way that the top part of north was the in because it wasn't in controls. And so, because it was on this form, though, I could see very clearly that the inner part of the word that was used in the compass road, the no or nor part, matched what was in the middle of the word controls. And it was like, oh, it's the interior that is the consonant, not
Yes,
the top half. And that was like the epiphany.
it blew the case
Uh,
wide open.
yeah, exactly. And so then we started to just kind of write down all of the elements we could see, all the distinct elements we saw that were on the interior of these symbols, and then all the bits we saw that were on the outside, and started figuring out which like letters they came from based on what the words and sounds we already knew. And it was just so exciting because we got to the point where we had almost all the consonants. There were a few we were missing, like G and M and like the CH sound and stuff like that. It was like, okay, we'll figure those out as we start to get more words. And then the vowels have been a little tricky because there are so many different vowel sounds.
And they don't map to like an easy English alphabet.
Yeah.
There's so many that are, and there's so many that depend on the way an individual person chooses to pronounce it. What was the one we got? It was button. It was so we got stuck
Yeah.
on button the other day because if I were creating this language and I were writing vowels for the two syllables ba and tun, the
Hmm.
they would be the same to me, but the game didn't have them as the same in a way that's not wrong or unreasonable. Just
Right.
we have to assume that they're going to be there's some wiggle room in a way that there
Right.
isn't
And
with like k.
yeah, and, like, also realizing that a lot of times when you have, like, the bottom right part filled in kind of disconnected, then that adds, like, an sound to the vowel, so you don't always get, like, a separate R consonant in a word if the vowel kind of blurs into the R. So, it's, like, things like that that it's like, okay, that's, like, really like, that took longer to sort out is what I will say.
Yes. Yeah. And something that I had like four contributions throughout the course of this, four out of like 100, but I'm proud of them. And the one I had was that like it was this was George more just noticing a cool choice in how they put this all together was how sometimes the voiced and unvoiced versions of these syllables and consonant of the consonant specifically would be flipped. Um,
Mhm.
so like how s and z are the vertical mirrors of each other. Um, and I'm even noticing and how like j and ch or j and sh are well j and sh are not quite the mirror, but like those are flipped.
Yeah.
Oh, je and sh. those are, yeah. So those are like the mirrored flipped, like measure and shield. Like they're
Yeah.
just mirrored vertically from one another. And something I'm even noticing now, which is almost like a cute version, is that you know how is that like the M as in Mary isn't there's
Uh-huh.
no unvoiced version of it, but there's a
Uh-huh.
visually flipped version of it, which is W, and that one is the opposite of M
Oh, in English,
in
that's
English.
essentially what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that when possible, it seemed like they tried to mimic the English form of the
Mm.
letter, like the H, if you squint, kind of looks like an H, like as much as you can, following the lines they
Oh,
have
I see
available,
what you mean. Yeah, like a little
you
lowercase
know?
thing.
Yeah, and like same with like the T is kind of T-ish shaped, and then the D is flipped of that because I assume that's a voiced thing.
Yeah, and the
T.
V looks like kind of a V just with a whole other couple of letters stuck on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is it's super good. Like, and so like it's was there anything that you found that like stumped you even now, or do you feel like you could like most of it, there were like all the things you've seen? There's no outliers remaining at this point.
I think the thing that still makes translating words sometimes difficult is trying to figure out the vowel, like what the vowel is exactly trying to communicate. Like that is definitely still like the squishiest part because in this diagram I wrote up, I tried to convey the vowel sound as I understood it as best I could, but I still feel like there's squishiness there. Like there I know that there's a word that I still am not sure. It's like P and then like some sort of like A-ish vowel sound. Maybe it's an A or an
Where is it?
I don't know.
All right, so we just came to uh, a revelation of sorts after a bunch of struggling to figure out what this was, what the A was, and like this was a good microcosm of everything of this whole process because the challenge, what we were getting stuck on, was what this symbol that I'm pulling up here. The if you look on the bottom row, six in, hey, and then two to the left of that stay. Um, that was the issue is that we were having trouble like figuring out like which was which, and it turns out that the the one so stay is correct, and then the other one is going to be like the sound is like an sound because this is let me hide the paint here because the frost bomb is saying the what was it saying the
Oh, the TNT bomb
or
said
or the frost bomb, the one that said like the pudding that explodes.
mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so that was we were like, is it the padding, the padding? But no, it's the pudding that explodes. So that's an sound. So
Yeah.
that's all. That was super cool. And
The
so
vowels are definitely the hardest part to figure out.
mm, they're so close to one another. And like I'm currently living. I'm a transplant like you, but I am transplanted from New York to California to Minnesota, and the way they pronounce bag here, the way the word bag rhymes with baby or rhymes with like I don't even know another word that sounds like it in actual human English, but like they pronounce it bag. Bag is how you pronounce it if you're in a store here. So they
That's
BAG rhymes
interesting.
with stay here in Minnesota. Um, and yeah, I don't know where the people who wrote this were from, and I
That
would
is
be
true.
curious to see if regional accents impacted
Mhm.
that. But so like as you've gone through and translated this, has it gone like now you can read it pretty like smoothly, pretty cleanly?
I can read some words without having to look them up. A lot of the small words, like is, to, the, like that kind of thing,
Hmm.
without having to read them. And I find for the longer words, as long as I'm kind of making some progress with the translation, so I have the context for it, I mostly figure out like the consonants first. And that's often enough to know what the word is. Sometimes have to go in and figure out the vowels just to make sure, but a lot of times even just like the first consonant and then glancing at the rest and being like, "Oh, okay, that confirms the word that I think it is." Um, One example where, like, I remember I was reading something and it was about the using your shield, and it was like, "Use to," and I thought it was going to say defend, and then I saw and I was like, "Oh, no, there's actually like a T on the end instead of a D on the end." So then I had to go back and read it closer and it said deflect. And
Hmm.
it's like, "Okay." Like, I just had to read it a bit closer because it didn't quite match what I was expecting it to say. But it definitely with practice is gotten easier. And it's super fun.
I have one. So you remember that the sleeping fox I found?
Mhm.
You could have done that too. Take a look at page 22
Page 22.
and check out the
Um,
bottom left card.
it's also there.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
I love that. Because I was just assuming that was like the bricks in the wall behind it or something. That was just
Yeah.
flavor design. But now, yeah, now we know.
Now you know.
I feel like this could lead to like a beautiful mind moment where we start looking at like the side of a building and seeing messages written like in this language when it's just like cracks on it. This could be,
Right?
yeah, this could probably drive you up a wall. Oh,
Yeah.
this is really exciting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
anything else that you want to add or do before we break apart and before I start to dive back into like the game itself, just kind of decoding this and seeing all the hidden things?
I guess I just to thank the game developers for putting such an intriguing aspect of the game in it. Like, it's cool enough that, like, they have this whole mechanic of you pick up the game manual as you go, like, that itself is really neat, but then to add on this layer of, like, it's mostly written in a language you don't understand, but that you can figure out, I just think is just shows such creativity on the part of the game developers, and I just love having a puzzle like this that's just so satisfying to solve.
Well said. Well said and fully agree. Um, yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, and that's going to be all for me for now. I'll see you in. I might see you like in 3 seconds, but probably a different day for me. This might be part of the same video. So yeah, see you later. Thanks for joining, Hatstand.
Bye.